G'day guys, Josh Huggett here from Huggett Media, and today we're going to talk about wedding workshops, photography workshops, travel workshops, essentially traveling to a different country and taking photos with a bunch of other photographers. Are they worth it? Should you spend your money on them? What should you actually come to expect from being at a wedding photography or a photography workshop? And who they're for. I'm a huge list guy, so I do have a little pros and cons list here for you. However, the long and the short of it is I definitely think you should be going to these workshops, but probably not for the reasons that are actually like being marketed. Workshops are often marketed as like, build your portfolio and get amazing portfolio building images and work alongside industry professionals and get photo, like it's all about the photos that you'll create. And I feel like the photos that you get at these workshops, although they will be great photos, the chances of them actually aligning with anything else in your portfolio is really, really slim. I will slap some images up on the screen of workshops that I've done in the past. But although they're really, really nice images, like the ones in Canada, and I made my own in New Zealand, and I just was lucky enough to go to Peru with AFTERSHOOT. Yes, they are fantastic images. However, they're not really going to book me that much more work over here in Australia, because nothing we have looks anything sort of like that, and you'll often shoot in a completely different way than you would if you were working back wherever you live. So we'll go through the cons first, just like kind of knock them out of the way. First one is cost. You're going to actually have to spend money to go to these things, which is always bad. I love spending money, but I don't like spending money on things that I have to. So there is always a cost, like you're going to have to travel there, because obviously number two is going to be location. They're not normally where you live, which is why they're so enticing, like Iceland, Canada, Peru, New Zealand, Europe. There are always these wedding photography conventions somewhere else in the world. So you're going to have to spend your time and your money on these things to go to these locations. That kind of sucks. However, is it really a con if you're having to go to the other side of the world? Maybe not. Third one, I've already kind of touched on it, is actually like the portfolio aspect of it. Yes, you will get some nice pictures for Instagram. However, are they really going to align with what your portfolio actually is and how you kind of use your portfolio going forward? A very, very stylized shoot where another professional photographer has posed it doesn't really align with any of the other photos that I sort of have in my portfolio, especially like the way that we work over here. We're very candid based and movement based, whereas lots of these workshops are very still, and you're posing models so that the models will stand in pose and they already kind of know what they're doing. So you are just kind of taking photos of models posed by somebody else and then posting them on your own Instagram. Does it align with your portfolio? Probably not. Is it a nice picture? Yeah, probably. One of the things that it kind of only really impacts us here in Australia or this side of the world, but is like the timing of these workshops. They happen in the American off season typically. So when everybody's starting to quiet down, or is it just the beginning of their season over there? That normally means it's peak wedding season for us over here. So if you're actually a working wedding photographer and you're working most weekends, then a lot of these things like WPPI, which isn't a workshop, but it's something that's been in the top of my head. And these workshops often happen during our busy season. So you're probably not going to have the time off in your calendar. Or if you do block off that time in your calendar, are you therefore losing work here in Australia? So are you getting an actual dollar to dollar worth from, blocking out time in your calendar here in Australia and then spending the money to travel over somewhere else to get some portfolio images that may not resonate with photos that you've already got here? Hope that makes sense. Another big thing is, and this goes into the strongest pro, but it is also a con as well, there is a huge social aspect in these workshops. If you want to make the absolute most out of these workshops and you want to bring as much information and get the most for your dollar out of these things, you're going to have to be social. For a lot of people, myself included, I'm not really that social when I first meet people. I'm really quite reserved. So it is hard for me to kind of like be that outgoing person and start that conversation. So if you're not willing to kind of dive into that social aspect, you're not going to get as much out of it as someone else who is a bit more sociable. So there's a huge social aspect, but that is also a major pro, which is what we're going to talk about in a sec. One of the major kind of like drawbacks of these workshops is that like you do work in reasonably large groups, and you are taking photos in large groups too. So typically, if you're a wedding photographer or just a photographer in general, you're used to being in charge and kind of running the day, and you know, there's only you there, maybe a second shooter, but maybe between the two of you, you kind of work well together. If you go to some of these workshops and you're in a really pristine location and you only get 10 to 15 minutes with each couple, there's going to be like 25 photographers around you. I'll put some clips up from when we were in Peru. And Peru was fantastic because we were really little groups too, but you are surrounded by other people sharing one couple. So your ability to kind of like pose them, you do have to work with all of the people around you. So it's not like you're going to Canada, you're going to pose a couple in front of, you know, like in Banff or whatever, and then you get free reign to that couple. You are sharing them with 20 other people. And normally there is a mentor running the group as well. So you are kind of locked into their posing and how they operate things. That again does go into some of the pros of like learning from others, but it does kind of suck when you can see a picture in your mind, but you're having to share the couple with 25 other people just to kind of like all work together. Some people aren't always as nice and they will kind of push in and it's just not that great. Lots of these companies are very good at mitigating that and telling people not to bring like heaps of off-camera flash equipment, because otherwise you're going to spend, especially if you're a natural light photographer like myself, you're going to spend heaps of time photoshopping out other people's flashes and just weird stuff like that. But lots of these companies, Focal was fantastic, AFTERSHOOT's been fantastic. They're very good at mitigating these issues, but it is something that's going to come up if you attend a lot of these things. Very little thing, but it's probably not going to be your style. It does go back into the portfolio stuff that we talked about earlier, but the poses and the prompts and the way that the models kind of move and interact, if you are working with a different lead photographer, so like if you're working with more like a studio type photographer or someone who's very into like a more artistic sort of posing style, that's not really going to mesh with your photography style. So you are kind of like, you'll either find yourself not taking photos or not taking photos of that particular scene, or taking photos and then never really using them. I have a lot of photos from like Canada and a lot of photos from Peru that will probably never see the light of day because I don't really match anything that I post online ever. And I don't really want to push that into the ethos either. I don't want to push that into the ethos either, because I don't want people to try to book me for it, because it's not something that I'm really comfortable doing. So happy to take the photo of somebody else's posed the couple, but it doesn't mesh with what I do. So I'm hesitant to put it out into the world in case people are starting to expect that from me. So that is another pretty big con, but really none of these cons are really that game changing. On to the pros and why you should be doing all of this stuff, which is why it's a pro. Relationship building. You're going to meet some absolutely bloody ripper people from all around the world that if you attend the same sorts of things, then you're going to be able to keep those relationships wherever you go and see the world from a completely different perspective. So made a lot of friends recently in Peru from America and Puerto Rico, and they all run their wedding businesses and they all run their wedding days completely different to myself. So I'm now able to look through a different lens and see kind of like how they're running their business and all that sort of stuff. That goes into number 2 here as well, which is speaking with like-minded people. So when you're not taking photos, where you need to kind of push your social skills as much as possible, make sure you're interacting with people, go down to the pub or the bar at the hotel or wherever you're staying and talk to people, have a chat, like get to know the people around you or the people that are attending, because you're going to be able to pick up little bits of information and spit ideas off of people. We've had a complete revamp of how we run our business purely based off what we were talking about in Peru. So you're able to like get those ideas and learn a little bit more, and maybe it's a conversation that you have in a bar in Puerto Rico when you're doing a workshop over there that is the catalyst of changing the entire way that you market your business because somebody said something, or And because you're talking to people from all walks of life, you're able to share more information than you would if you were talking to a local photographer. So if you're talking to your friend who's also a wedding photographer, you may not divulge some information because then they're just going to kind of steal that and implement it in their own business. Whereas if you're talking to someone from a completely different country, it doesn't matter if they implement what you're saying. You could tell them your entire marketing strategy. You could walk them through your booking process from start to finish. It doesn't matter because they're not going to be able to impact your bookings back home. So you can just be a complete open book, and that way you're actually able to have some really in-depth conversations about booking processes, marketing, how you can better represent yourself, what works, what doesn't work, finances, how much you're spending per lead, how much you're making, all that sort of stuff, because it's just like, it sounds so fucking weird to say, but it's really freeing being able to say this sort of stuff to people and know that it's not going to actually impact your business back home. Everyone you talk to in your sort of local community, regardless of how good a friend they are or regardless of how well you know them, are going to take little bits of information that you say and they're going to implement it into their own business. And you're probably subconsciously doing the same thing as well. You're talking to someone, they say that it works really, really well, then all of a sudden a few weeks later you'll see it implemented in your own business without even really second guessing where that idea came from. But being able to say it to a completely different group of people with no ramifications back home is just bloody fantastic. I mean, I've gone through like 3 of them here. Like another one was bouncing ideas off of each other. That's a great one we just kind of went through. Photographing in different locations. Although it is a con because it doesn't really match your portfolio, it does teach you to work in different locations. So you're going to be working, you know, there's a wedding venue down here in Adelaide called Glen Ewan Estate. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favourite venues to shoot at ever. I just love it. The staff are fantastic. The venue's fantastic. The sunset spot's great. But I've already been there like 8 times this year, and it's currently almost May. And I've got another 7 to go. Oop, just lost my backlight. I've got another 7 weddings there this year as well. So I'm going to be there a lot. You do kind of find yourself falling into the same pattern of taking the same photos over and over again. Whereas if you're in a completely different location, then you're able to take a completely different set of photos. You're able to kind of trigger those, you're able to trigger that sort of like creative mindset and take photos that you maybe otherwise wouldn't have thought of taking because you're in a completely different spot. Again, was a con, probably a negative, no, was a con, is a pro as well, is seeing different styles of work. I pretty much don't use the flash on my wedding days until the dance floor, but I was working alongside a bunch of photographers and they use flash all day, off-camera flash for everything, forever, always. So I was able to see a completely different style of work, a completely different workflow. Am I going to implement it in my own business? Probably not. Did it make me think about it? Yeah, you know, just like little fill lights and that sort of stuff. I hope that I was able to impart some wisdom on natural light to other people. But you're able to see a completely different style. We had a lot of talks from like studio photographers too, and people that take photos in studios, and that's not something we really do here. I mean, we do that much studio work here, but hearing from proper studio photographers and how they light things and think and create these big masterpieces was definitely something cool and something that, you know, now that I've learned a little bit about, maybe down the line is something that we kind of add into our portfolio. Maybe it's something that we'll never use again, but it's always nice to have sort of that different thought process or that different viewpoint going forward, especially in something like photography where it's ever growing. Probably one of the best bits about these workshops is the actual like classes. They're my favorite part, where you just get to sit down and learn from well-established photographers from all around the world. Doesn't matter how many times I see Sam Hurd or speak to Sam Hurd or just have a chat with him, his talks are just, I don't know, man, he sees the world in such a fucking weird way. It's just ridiculous. And I could literally listen to him talk about the same fucking things over and over again. But just like little things like that, and you always leave like feeling a little bit more, you know, incentivized to be that little bit more creative. Listening to Sophia talking about like all of her studio work and her backstory and learning about that and how she uses her emotion to take her photos and Just so much stuff that just sitting down and listening to other people, it's kind of like a lecture, but not really a lecture because there's only so few of you in the room. They're my favourite parts, just like listening to those people that are, albeit further ahead in their businesses than you, or been working longer than you, or doing something completely different to you, and taking in that information and just like learning from someone that you probably wouldn't otherwise have a chat with. Having the opportunity to sit down and learn from them is always one of my favourite things to do. Last two things. One, location. You get to go somewhere completely different and just like go to the other side of the world. Like Peru was absolutely nowhere near the top of my to visit list, but now I've seen Machu Picchu. That's fantastic. How cool. And the good second thing is it's a tax deduction. Because you're going for work and you're learning and you're a photographer, use it as a tax deduction. That way you can travel the world, you can see all of the wonders of the world, see all these fantastic places, hang out with fantastic people, and then you just fucking take it off your tax dollar. How good. That's it. I think you should go to a workshop. If you're considering it, go to a workshop, even if you do one. The way I'm currently working on a couple of workshops down here in Australia as well, and the way that we're going to run them is a little bit different, where our plan is to use like real couples instead of models, so that you're actually learning how to pose and prompt real people, not that models aren't real people, but like real couples rather than models that already know sort of what to do with their faces. You're going to work with real people, and the plan is real engaged people as well. So if you're an Australian photographer and you come to one of these workshops, then there's the possibility that you could book that wedding. So you are also like offsetting some of the costs by maybe booking a wedding out of it as well. I think that's a really cool way to do it. So we're going to work on that. But yeah, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. If you've got any questions or anything you'd like me to answer, drop it in the comments. Or what do you think? Are you going to go to a workshop? Have you been to a workshop? What was your favourite and least favourite thing about that workshop? But yeah, if you've got any questions for Tog Talk, make sure you put them in the comments below, or jump over to the Tog Talk playlist and drop a comment in there. That's where we answer wedding photography questions every single week. Until then, have a fantastic day, do fun stuff and be good, and I will speak to you soon.